What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This weekend we have UFC 330, Islam taking on Ian Garry for the welterweight title. The card is okay. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the full card predictions. All right. Our first fight on the card, we got Orolbai versus Jeremiah Wells. I'm going to take Orolbai to win via second round submission. You know, Orolbai, he's a guy that's been very, very impressive throughout his UFC career, except for the one fight that he did drop to Mateusz Rebecki, where that was a very, very close fight. But in his UFC debut, a win that has aged really good for him was against Uros Medic, pretty much dominated that fight, was able to beat Alvarez Brenner, lost to Rebecki, but since that fight, he has moved up. Well, he did not move up for this fight, but he did miss weight. But basically, his last three fights, he has fought at welterweight, and he's done much, much better. Because even in the Alvarez Brenner fight, you know, he got a little bit tired towards the end of that one. And of course, in the Rebecki matchup, he did not have a good performance whatsoever. But in his last three fights, he's looked much, much better fighting at 170. The weight cut, the weight cut clearly affected him. Easily got a first round Kimura over Musayev. You know, that's a win that's aged well. Musayev's beat Ignacio Bahamondes and Ludovic Klein since then. And then he knocked out Jack Hermanson and completely dominated Chris Curtis with the grappling. So, you know, I really like what I'm seeing from Orolbai. He's very, very physically strong. When he gets that body lock around you, it's very difficult to break the grip. He's got power in his hands also. And, you know, he's tough as nails. He has an absolute iron chin. We saw that in the Rebecki fight. And also Uros Medic, clipped him pretty badly in their fight. Orolbai ate that shit. And, yeah, I think he's going to be able to basically have a similar performance to what he did against Chris Curtis in this fight. Jeremiah Wells, BJJ black belt, has some UFC wins. I believe he did beat Simmelsberger a while back. Yeah, he beat Simmelsberger, split decision. But, you know, you're getting subbed by Carlston Harris. You're losing Max Griffin. You're barely beating Thimba Garimbo and getting out-grappled in the beginning of that fight. I think that Orolbai is just going to be able to put a heavy wrestling pace on him, and then eventually get the second round submission after Jeremiah Wells gets a little bit tired later into the fight. And I think Orolbai has actually got better stand-up than Wells too. Wells, he's one of these guys, he swings big hooks, but doesn't really aim anything, doesn't have great technicality. Orolbai has pretty good uppercuts. He has a nice front kick up the middle to push you to the fence. And yeah, Orolbai, very well-balanced fighter. He's going to be able to dominate this fight. Next fight on the card, we got Brahimaj versus Neil Magny. I'm going to take Neil Magny here to win by decision. I think his height and reach advantage is going to help him here. And when you look at the guys Neil Magny's losing to and how he's losing to them, I don't think that Brahimaj is going to be able to bring anything like that to the table. Brahimaj, you know, he lost to Thimba Garimbo pretty dominantly a while back. He got out-grappled for 3 rounds in that fight, couldn't keep up with the pace or the physicality. And you look at his last few wins against Mickey Gall, got the TKO there, but that's Mickey Gall. Was able to sub Billy Ray Goff, beautiful guillotine, and was able to do the exact same thing to Austin Vanderford. Got out-grappled here by Pinelli Soriano. And, you know, you look at the Pinelli Soriano fight, you look at the Thimba Garimbo fight, I think Neil Magny can kind of do something similar, hold him up against the fence, use the range advantage to just kind of piece him apart at range. And you look at Jake Matthews, Neil Magny's most recent win, that was a great performance. He was piecing him up on the feet, staying pretty defensively sound. You know, Jake Matthews has pretty good boxing, better boxing, I would say, than Brahimaj. And he wasn't really landing clean on Magny. You know, got subbed by Amasov, but Amasov's an absolute beast. You know, he has much better wrestling than Brahimaj. Brahimaj has good jiu-jitsu and submission ability, but his actual wrestling isn't too good. And then he was able to beat Alezu Dos Santos. I always butcher his fucking name, but Dos Santos, Neil Magny was able to beat him by TKO too. You know, he loses to Ian Garry. He loses to Shavkat, Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, but those guys are absolute cream of the crop, top 5 in this division. When he fights guys that are lower level than that, you know, Phil Rowe, and who else are some people that he's beat recently? dude, I forgot about the win versus Mike Malott. Even though he was kind of losing that fight minute to minute, he was able to get the clutch third round TKO. Give me Neil Magny here. He's one of these old veterans that still, performs well. He's not completely washed up. And like I said, Ramiz, he's a good fight finisher, but I don't see him landing clean and knocking out Neil Magny here. And I don't think that Neil Magny is just going to dive into a guillotine like Vanderford or Billy Ray Goff. So yeah, give me Neil Magny here by decision. Next fight on the card, Rafael Tobias versus Lucas Fernando. I forgot who Lucas Fernando fought on the Contender Series. Who did Rafael Tobias fight? Oh yeah, Dair Nurgaze pretty much got pieced up in that fight. This one is pretty much a coin flip, but I'm going to take Lucas Fernando. He did lose on the Contender Series. I forget to who he lost, but this is going to be one of those lower level fights. No need to dig too deep into the weeds on this one. But yeah, I'll take Fernando just for the pick. Next fight on the card, Tresean Gore versus Vicente Luque. Interesting fight here, man. Tresean Gore is not a guy that I rate very highly. I don't think he has much talent whatsoever. He has a decent guillotine. He was able to snatch up Trockley and Josh Frimmed in that guillotine. But, you're losing to Cody Brundage by TKO. That's a terrible look. Pretty much got pieced up badly by Marco Tulio. Lost to Rodolfo Vieira. Got outstruck by Rodolfo Vieira. So that's a pretty concerning look. Now, he did have a good bounce back win as a huge underdog versus Makhachev. But, Makhachev kind of showed his level in that fight. He has decent wrestling, but that's really all he brings to the table. I'm going to pick Vicente Luque here in this fight because, like I said, I just don't rate Tresean Gore. He has okay stand up, like it's very, rudimentary, and he has that guillotine. But other than that, he's not the fighter that Vicente Luque is. Vicente Luque, he's fought much higher level competition, and he has much better finishing ability, in my opinion. Not only with the striking, but on the ground as well. He got 2 submission wins recently against solid competition. Against Kelvin Gastelum got that submission, and then also against Mcconico got that submission. And did lose to Kevin Holland and Joel Alvarez, but both of those guys are long, lanky fighters. Luque was at a reach disadvantage. Tresean Gore is not really going to bring that to the table. They're going to be about the same size. And I just think Luque is better. I think his body kicks are better. I think his boxing overall is going to be better. I think his offensive wrestling is better than Tresean Gore. Luque is one of these guys that he's been around a long time. He's taken a lot of damage. We of course remember the Jeff Neal fight, and he's been knocked out quite a few times. Buckley got him by TKO in what was a weird stoppage. A lot of people wrote off Vicente Luque after that, but I do think that he's just a much more skilled fighter than Tresean Gore. He's got much more experience, and I think he's going to be able to win this one. So I'll take Vicente Luque here to win I'll pick him via decision over Tresean Gore. I just don't think Tresean Gore is that good, and he doesn't have great durability in his own right. Like, he got dropped on the deck like a fish versus Makhachev, and Makhachev's nowhere near the striker that Luque is. So, obviously, Luque, he's one of these guys that's taken a lot of damage in the past, but, his durability looked fine against Joel Alvarez. So, I'll pick Luque here via decision. Next fight on the card, Dante Johnson versus Eric Mcconico. I'm going to pick Eric Mcconico here. He beat Rodolfo Vieira last time out in what was a back and forth fight. Lost to Susarkayev and was able to beat Cody Brundage. Lost to Nursultan Rudzaboyev, but, Nursultan Rudzaboyev and Susarkayev, very high level competition. Both of those guys are much, much, much better than Dante Johnson. Don't let the 8-0 record confuse you. Dante Johnson is not a good fighter whatsoever. He is just incredibly, I don't even know how to explain it. He fights almost like he's bow-legged. He has no footwork whatsoever. He's super uncoordinated. He has some natural, explosive ability, and he was able to get the submission over Dumas. He can grapple a little bit. Split decision with Brundage, though. I know Eric Mcconico went to a split decision with Brundage as well, but Dante Johnson, it literally looks like his legs are locked. Like, he doesn't bend his legs any when he's trying to move around. His striking is just super stiff. He has no head movement. He just is not a natural fighter whatsoever. Like, he does not look like a guy that should be fighting in the UFC. He's very low skilled. Like, he has athleticism and heart, but no skill whatsoever. Mcconico, on the other hand, he's a pretty decently talented fighter. You know, he doesn't stand out anywhere, but he has decent leg kicks. He has good fence work. His rangy striking is going to be a lot better than Dante Johnson here. He's going to have a massive height and reach advantage. And, you know, Dante Johnson's just not a UFC level athlete. Like, he won in the Contender Series against not a good fighter. And then, you know, he's beaten Dumas and fucking Cody Brundage. Like, he's not that good. He's not a 8-0 record type of fighter by any means. And yeah, I just don't like his technical ability at all. So give me Eric Mcconico. I'll take him here by decision. Dante Johnson literally just looks like a baby giraffe. His legs are fucking stiff. He has no footwork, no natural agility. So yeah, I'm going to take Eric Mcconico. More well-rounded fighter. Next fight on the card, we got Jalen Turner versus Caio Fernandes. I'm going to pick Caio Fernandes here. I'll pick him by third round TKO. Don't get me wrong, Jalen Turner, good fighter. He's gotten great wins in the past. You know, like against, he beat Medic back in the day, which was a good win from him. Was able to beat Jamie Malaki, Brad Riddell. Loki kind of threw away the win versus Gamrot, threw away the win versus Dan Hooker. Absolutely caught a body versus Bobby Green. But, you know, you look at these two fights before he took his slight time off, before he came back and beat Barboza, they were really bad performances. You know, against Moicano, gets the early knockdown, and then concedes basically in the second round, gets ground and pound TKO'd, and then was winning against Bahamondes, was in top position, but then just, you know, gets into triangle and barely even tries to defend. Like, he doesn't even posture up whatsoever. He could have just disengaged from the grappling, but, you know, got subbed in that fight, retires for a little bit, comes back to face the corpse of Edson Barboza, and he gets the round 1 TKO there, which was expected. Like, Barboza's super washed, but Caio Fernandes is not washed, and he's coming in off of a good win streak. You know, the guys he's beaten, he losing to Diakese is a terrible look, so that's obviously a concern there. But, you know, he beat Guram and he beat Harry Hardwick in very, very nice fashion. And I really like his calf kicks. He has some of the best calf kicks in the game. His striking overall is pretty solid. He can grapple. Now, the height and reach disadvantage is going to be interesting for him here, but I think he can kind of just weather the early storm. I think Jalen Turner is he's one of these taller fighters that fights too aggressive sometimes. You know, he's a guy that needs to let a shorter fighter come to him, but he'll end up kind of getting on the front foot, marching down a shorter fighter, and then running into shots he doesn't need to, running into takedowns he doesn't need to. Jalen Turner's got good submissions, good Muay Thai. The front kicks up the middle, the body kicks are solid, good straight 1-2s. But I think Fernandes is going to be able to just land awkward shots from weird angles that he doesn't see coming. And I still have my concerns about Jalen Turner's durability, his cardio, and his overall willingness to fight when the going gets tough. You know, even in the Barboza fight, he was taking some shots. And, you know, if he didn't get that first round TKO there, who knows how that fight would have gone. You know, he was able to knock him down and hurt him. But I think Fernandes can kind of, you know, stay on the outside, make Jalen Turner come to him. I think he can maybe time some takedowns, time some counter shots. And I think those calf kicks, even though Jalen Turner being a southpaw, it's not going to be as available, he can go to the inside of the leg. I just think Caio Fernandes is a talented fighter, you know, and I'm going to take him here to win via round 3 TKO. I think he can, you know, kind of just circle to his left, stay away from Jalen Turner's power side, chop up the inside leg, time some smart takedowns, and then eventually second, third round, get his own aggression going a little bit once Jalen Turner tires out. It could look like the Moicano fight a little bit. So yeah, give me Caio Fernandes, third round TKO. Next fight on the card, we got Chidi Njokauni versus Joel Alvarez. Interesting fight here. You know, Chidi, very good Muay Thai, very good leg kicks, front kicks up the middle. The clinch works nice, knees and elbows in combination. Very good work from Chidi Njokauni. But he is one of the most one-dimensional fighters ever. Like, he cannot grapple at all to save his life, and he can't operate at any distance, or like he can't strike unless you're literally standing stationary in the middle of the cage, just going tit for tat. I go, you go, I go, you go. He can't fight at a high pace. He can't move and strike. He has to be stationary. If you can keep him on his back foot or make him have to pressure you, he's very ineffective. And his technique is very, very good, but he's just a fighter that, he's easily taken advantage of in some parts of the game. Like Mikel Olasejek, even Duraev back in the day beat him using some takedowns. He lost to Carlos Leal recently. That was his last fight, where he did a good job in that fight to keep it competitive and landed some good knees and stuff, but Leal pretty much just put a pace on him, boxed him up. He got that beautiful knee versus Dos Santos. That was a great finish there. But, Reese McKee, Jared Gooden, he kind of stunk up those fights, didn't really put a stamp on it. He's not always super dangerous. He does have some good finishes, like against Todorovic. That was a good finish there. But you look at the guys that are just able to weather the early storm, and once you use aggression on him and you make him start to move, he falls apart. Because Chidi does not have good footwork or head movement whatsoever. Robocop ate that big knee and then was able to pretty much just march him down and finish him with power shots. Same shit for Mikel Olasejek. Marched him down, finished him with power shots. If you make Chidi Njokauni use footwork, he falls off a cliff every time because he doesn't have good cardio and he doesn't have good footwork. Jake Matthews hopped on the back as soon as that fight started and finished him. Chidi's submission defense isn't very good. Cardio isn't very good. Just overall defense to boxing isn't very good. Unless Joel Alvarez just stands in the middle of the cage with him and goes tit for tat, strike for strike with him, he's going to win this fight. If he fights with any type of aggression, he'll win this fight. I think his hand speed is superior. He's got nasty calf kicks. His grappling is going to be much, much better. And he's also the much faster fighter. Chidi, he's clean. He's got good technique and stuff, but he's just kind of slow and stuck in the mud. Like Joel Alvarez, I think, is a much better athlete. I think he has a much better chin. Moving up to 170 is going to help him a lot here. When you look at his fight versus Luque, Joel Alvarez, he was getting his legs chewed up a little bit, kind of getting calf kicked and body kicked a lot. So that's a concerning look when you're facing a really good kicker like Chidi. But, even in this Amosov fight where he was really having to fend off some next level grappling, he was still landing his own shots pretty well. We remember he bodied Jakar Close, and that's a good win. I rate Jakar Close. I'm going to pick Joel Alvarez here to win by finish. I think he'll get a second round submission. I think he can, push the envelope a little bit, make Chidi work, get him tired, and then eventually second round, maybe land like a nice spinning elbow, front kick to the face. He drops him, wraps up a Darce choke or something like that. Maybe pulls a guillotine. But yeah, I'm going to pick Joel Alvarez via second round submission. I think even in the clinch where Chidi does excel, we remember Joel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner. He absolutely dog walked him in the clinch with those knees to the body and to the head. So he can hold his own in the Muay Thai clinch against Chidi. So yeah, give me Joel Alvarez, second round sub. Next fight on the card, Esteban Ribovics versus Edson Barboza. Look, guys, I love Edson Barboza. He's one of the best kickers in all of MMA history. One of the best strikers in all of MMA history. He has kick finishes on all three levels, like leg kicks, body kicks, and head kick TKOs, flying knees, spinning wheel kick to the dome. He's one of the best dynamic strikers in UFC history, but he's been around for fucking ages, and he just does not have durability anymore. He's one of these guys like Santiago Ponzinibbio. He still is like a good fighter, technically, and even physically a little bit, but it's just the durability that is completely shot, and we really saw that at featherweight. He was getting dropped all over the place in all of these fights. He got dropped versus Yusuf, got just boxed up bad versus Murphy. He even got, pieced up and dropped by Jakar Close, and Jakar Close is like not the best striker. Finished by Jalen Turner. Like, he's taken so much damage in these fights. He even got dropped by Bryce Mitchell, finished by Giga Chikadze. His last win, which was against Sadiq Yusuf, he even had to grapple a little bit in that fight. And like I said, got dropped in the first round, took so many significant strikes versus Murphy, got dropped versus Close, finished versus Jalen Turner. Like, Barboza, he's just on a decline. Like, he should have retired. He probably should have retired after this Lerone Murphy fight, because that was a bad look. He looks like Michael Chandler when he's out there. He has no legs underneath him. As soon as he gets hit with something clean, it's like his feet just are all over the place. His legs are failing him. He has no balance. He'll try to throw a spinning wheel kick and literally just fall over. Like, that happened versus Lerone Murphy, and it was really sad to see. But, Barboza, I will say that Ribovic's weaknesses in his game, it's leg kick defense and grappling defense. We saw the grappling defense, on display versus Gamrot, or the lack thereof, should I say, and he got pretty much schooled in that fight, submitted. Unless Barboza can get like a lucky leg kick TKO, Ribovics should roll here. The way Ribovics fights is an absolute nightmare for Edson Barboza. Like, we saw Lerone, we saw Jakar Close do the same thing, just kind of push a heavy boxing pace on him and not let Barboza like reset to be able to get his kicks going. If you do that, you will beat Edson Barboza. And Ribovics is literally that style to a T. Even when he fights a guy that's much bigger and rangier than him, like Daniel Zellhuber, Ribovics is able to march forward, box him up. He's got excellent combination work. Like, he'll go uppercut, two hooks, calf kick, and he just continuously pushes that pace. Like, his fight versus Elvis Brenner was an absolute war. Narrowly lost to Hagparas. Like, that fight could have gone either way. Was able to beat Zellhuber. Nasty finish over McKinney. That's, pretty good win there. Displayed some dynamic striking with that head kick. And like I said, Ribovics, he is just, gas pedal all the way to the floor the whole time. Never lets you breathe. Never lets you reset. He'll work the body shots. He'll work the leg kicks. And yeah, this is a nightmare matchup for Barboza. Barboza, he has to fight guys that, will allow him to just stay on the center of the cage and go kick for kick. Ribovics is going to push him up against the fence, box his head off, and just put a pace that's way too much for Barboza to handle at this point in his career. Barboza is going to get tired. He's going to be getting damaged up. He's got eye injuries or something. Like, it's like one of his eyes is open, one of them's closed. I think that right eye is going to get closed up by a clean left hook pretty early in the fight. And Ribovics has no grappling threat to worry about coming back in his direction. So, yeah, Esteban Ribovics, that should be another lock here on the card. He should finish Barboza first round, realistically. It's probably going to, look like Ponzinibbio's last fight versus Sam Patterson. So, yeah, give me Ribovics here via round 1 TKO. Next fight on the card, Mansur Abdul Malik versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, Mansur Abdul Malik's almost a 6-1 favorite, and that's not at all justified. Like, I don't really think Malik is that great. Now, he's an athlete for sure. He's a great athlete, super explosive, fight finishing ability. But you look at some of his recent performances, against Cody Brundage, against Klein. Like, neither of those performances were very impressive whatsoever. Like, Trockley dropped like a fly in the first second. We all knew that was going to happen. He doesn't even care about fighting. But like Todorovic, yeah, he got the first round TKO, just used his athleticism, slugged, got the knockout, right? And on the Contender Series, pretty much the same thing. He's strong, he's fast, he has KO power. But in terms of his technicalities, I don't think Mansur Abdul Malik's that good. He's just, he's a balanced fighter, but he doesn't stand out anywhere. Got dropped by a spinning elbow by Klein, blue collar Klein. Was able to get him tired and then finished him in the second. It's like, very lackluster fight versus Cody Brundage. Got absolutely schooled and minced up by Yusri Belgari. And don't get me wrong, like Dustin Stoltzfus, he's no world beater, but, he does have, that dog in him, and he has a lot of UFC experience. Let's just take a look at his resume real quick. Damn, he did go, 0-4 starting out his UFC career? No, he beat Grant. I don't even remember this motherfucker. Lost to GM3, lost to Rodolfo Vieira, lost to Kyle Dawkins. That's pretty rough. Lost to Abu. Damn, he was able to beat Soriano. That's crazy. He beat Soriano, got spinning elbowed by Bruno Fajeda, was able to beat Marc-Andre Barriute, got the TKO there. Had a gritty decision in both of his last fights. Like, he performed well in both of these last fights versus KG and against Nursultan. You know, got outboxed a little bit versus KG and had a great performance against Rudziboyev, but Rudziboyev had the bigger moments, was able to capitalize with the reach advantage. But Stoltzfus, he can make this one competitive. Even though he's a huge underdog, like maybe Dustin Stoltzfus point spread could be a good play here because, this is going to be a fight between two guys that are similar skill level. Like Dustin, he has okay striking, okay grappling. Like, he's not really good anywhere. Neither of these guys are really good anywhere. Mansour Malik obviously has the youth, size, athleticism, power advantage, but I don't think he has the actual skill to be able to knock out Dustin Stoltzfus easily. I'm going to take Mansour Malik 29-28 decision. I think Stoltzfus might, have a crafty takedown in his back pocket. Maybe he gets a lucky knockdown similar to Blue Collar Klein. I'll say Dustin Stoltzfus picks up a round in this fight, loses on the scorecards, kind of similar to his last two fights, but I don't think Mansour Malik's that good. I'm not high on him whatsoever. I'm not high on him. So, yeah, give me Malik 29-28 decision. We're missing a fight here. Where's Charles Johnson versus Jose Ochoa? Where's that fight? Is that fight canceled? I literally remember it was like the third fight down, early prelims. What the fuck? Okay, well, for some reason, Charles Johnson versus Jose Ochoa is not on the UFC website. That's so strange. All right, we got Charles Johnson versus Jose Ochoa in the feature fight of the evening. It's hard not to pick Jose Ochoa here. Even though there's definitely value on Charles Johnson plus 300, I just do think that Jose Ochoa is going to be the fighter with his hand raised here at the end of the night. You look at his UFC debut, lost to Lerner Kavanaugh. Okay, that's a very high level of competition. And he also lost to Islam Makhachev, but he had a much better performance against Islam Makhachev than Charles Johnson did. Charles Johnson had a woeful performance last time out against Islam Makhachev, and to me, ever since he beat Lerner Kavanaugh, where, of course, Jose Ochoa lost at Lerner Kavanaugh, and Charles Johnson beat Kavanaugh, ever since that fight, it's, for some reason, I don't know if it's his age finally catching up to him or what, but he's looked like shit ever since that fight. Looked like absolute shit versus Perez, got knocked out, looked like a drunk baby giraffe on the feet, was able to barely beat Bruno Silva. I honestly thought Bruno Silva won that fight, and then looked horrible against Islam Makhachev, got completely dominated start to finish there. Now, of course, Charles Johnson, the grappling is really what he's always struggled with. Heavy pressure wrestlers, you think of Muhammad Makhachev, back in the day beating him in his UFC debut, lost to Ode Osborne, Cody Durden, Rafael Estevam, all, pretty much because of the grappling, was able to beat Jimmy Flick and Zuma Gulov. Zuma Gulov's one's okay, but, he did go on a nice little win streak, as at Maxim J. Cadley beat the champion Joshua Van with a crazy round 3 uppercut. The Sumaderji win looks good in hindsight, but, Tamirov, he had a decent performance against Tamirov. We know how good Tamirov is. But like I said, these last 3 fights from Charles Johnson, it's just looked horrible. Like, he's just looked completely washed up. And Jose Ochoa, he had an excellent performance last time out versus Clayton Carpenter. Absolutely pieced him up on the feet the whole time. Displayed great weapons, top to bottom elbows, good boxing, good kicks, good footwork. His cardio looks on point. And I think he's going to be the much more durable fighter here. Jose Ochoa, we saw him knock out Cody Durden easily. And, I think if he hits Charles Johnson with those type of shots, Charles Johnson's going down. Like, I think his chin isn't what it used to be. I think the constant activity and the constant fight camps for Charles Johnson, one, it's taking a toll on him physically. He's trying to rush it. Because ever since he beat Joshua Van, it's like he's had this chip on his shoulder where he thinks he's better than he really is. And he's just trying to get a win streak going so he can get into the rankings. But then I think he's just not taking his preparation seriously enough. And he's losing these fights because, one, he's overtrained. Two, he's underprepared for the specific stylistic matchup. And yeah, it's just Charles Johnson, he's an interesting character. Like, he can beat top tier competition like Kavanaugh and Van and then just completely get smoked versus Islam Makhachev and Alex Perez. Like, pretty crazy. But I just do think that this fight is going to take place on the feet. I think that Ochoa, he's a guy that is not going to get completely overwhelmed by the pressure and the speed and the kind of fast twitch ability that Charles Johnson brings to the table. You know, we even saw Leonard Kavanaugh last time out versus Brandon Royval. He struggled with that. I think that Ochoa is going to be able to match the pace a little bit. He's not going to get completely overwhelmed with the pace that Charles Johnson puts. And I think he just has way more power than Charles Johnson. Like, Charles Johnson is a pillow puncher, let's be real. Somehow he just absolutely cleans Leonard Kavanaugh and Joshua Van with one right hand, and they both drop on the deck like a fish. But then he can't fucking hurt Alex Perez, Bruno Silva, or Islam Makhachev at all if his life depends on it. So, like I said, Charles Johnson, he's an interesting guy. Interesting fighter to try to predict because he's very inconsistent. But I'm going to take Jose Ochoa here to win via decision. I'll pick him to win via decision. Charles Johnson, not an easy guy to finish. All right. Co-main event of the evening, Mackenzie Dern versus Gillian Robertson. Look, I'm not going to give a super technical breakdown here, but I'm going to pick Gillian Robertson just because I like her more. I like what she brings to the table. I like her attitude. She tries to finish fights. Mackenzie Dern might be the more talented grappler, probably better in top position. Gillian Robertson, you know, we've seen her have iffy performances, you know, against Limos. Against Limos, that wasn't a great performance, and obviously the level of competition, like the Karate Hottie, Polyana Viana, like the level of comp is not that good for Gillian Robertson, but she's a fighter I support. I like her attitude. I think she's got that dog in her. So I'll pick her to beat Mackenzie Dern, who, even though Dern has definitely fought the higher level of comp, and, you know, she beat Godinez, Gillian lost to Godinez. So, you know, it's a difficult one to call. WMMA is always difficult to give a good prediction for, but I'll pick the underdog here, Gillian Robertson, to upset Mackenzie Dern. Maybe she can get like a lucky submission. So give me Gillian Robertson, round 2, guillotine choke. All right, we move on to the main event of the evening, Islam Makhachev versus Ian Garry. Now, with this fight, it's going to be very, very technical. I think that we're going to see a slower paced fight. Ian Garry, I thought had a better chance before I watched tape for this fight than I do after watching tape for this fight. Before watching tape for this fight, my thought process behind this matchup was, okay, Islam Makhachev, obviously, you know, a top 2 fighter of all time. He's one of the best ever. But 2 performances that really were stuck in my head leading me into this fight were obviously the Volk 1 fight and the Dustin Poirier fight. After rewatching the Volk 1 fight and the Dustin Poirier fight, I think if you really watch those with an educated eye, I think you'll realize that the Dustin Poirier fight was actually more competitive than the Volkanovski 1 fight. And that's a hot take, but I think Islam was actually comfortably ahead of Volkanovski going into that 5th round. I think it really could have been 2-2 against DP going into their 5th round. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Watch that fight with no commentary and watch it closely. Every single exchange. Both of them. It was more competitive with Dustin Poirier than it was for Volkanovski. Now, do I think Dustin Poirier is a better fighter than Volkanovski? No. Is he better at anti-grappling than Volkanovski? I don't really think so. But I think that the size of Volk, you know, Volk being so small, I really do think that made that fight much easier for Islam. Not only with the grappling, but with the stand-up also. Because he had much more you know, difficulty taking down Dustin Poirier and striking with Dustin Poirier compared to the Volk fight. My point being is that if it's 2-2 going into the fifth against DP, I know that Islam was like a little bit handicapped that night. Not sure really what was wrong with him. May have been staph or something like that, but he was definitely not himself that night 100%. But if Ian Garry can replicate that type of performance, but be better on the feet than DP, which he will be, he'll be more effective on the feet in this fight than Dustin Poirier was. Can he sneak a 3-2 decision? It's a possibility. It's a possibility. Now, it's obviously hard to pick against Makhachev just because we know the deal with Islam. I mean, there's no point of reading the resume. He's one of the best of all time. Khabib 2.0, excellent striking from southpaw, probably the best submission artist in the UFC ever, apart from Charles Oliveira, who he did submit. And, you know, we know the Dagestani wrestling. He has excellent takedowns, excellent judo trips. He can take you down in the middle of the cage, against the fence. You know, he has so many different types of shots as well. Like, he has excellent single legs where he'll, you know, he can transition his single leg so many different ways to get you down. He can hit a leg reap. He can run the pipe. His double legs are fantastic as well. He can dip right underneath your punches, GSP style, take you down with the double leg. Against the fence, it's probably his best area to get takedowns at a high clip. You know, you saw in both the Dustin and the Volk fights, Islam really did struggle to get them down in the center of the cage. It would be a striking combination with a knee on the end of it to push Volk against the fence. And then Islam, you know, he'll drop his level, shoot a single leg, transition that to the body lock. And really where Islam needs to have this fight take place is against the fence with the body lock. I don't think he's going to have near the amount of success just taking down Ian Garry in the open like he did versus JDM. I don't think he's going to have any type of success like that against Ian like he did against JDM. Ian has excellent initial takedown defense out in the open. But, you know, I kind of was thinking, to continue on with my point at the beginning, I was thinking that Ian Garry could possibly replicate the performance that Dustin had, maybe take some things that Volk did against Islam and use that to have a good performance. But looking at the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, looking at the Belal Muhammad fights, before I really rewatched those carefully, I remember, okay, Ian Garry, he did really good on the feet. Like, I was kind of thinking he schooled Belal, and it was like a nice 3-2 performance versus Shavkat where he did good, but just kind of got outstruck a little bit. Dude, the Belal Muhammad fight was way more competitive than I remember it being. And also, Belal got to the body lock like 3 or 4 times in that fight against the fence. Now, of course, Ian Garry did a good job at negating actually getting taken down from that spot, but Belal Muhammad does not have anywhere near the takedown arsenal, especially against the fence with the body lock takedown that Islam Makhachev does. It's not in the same stratosphere. Belal does not have good judo trips. He does not have good back taking ability, and that's like Islam's, you know, bread and butter. That's where he's best at. So, you know, I don't think that Islam's going to be able to get Ian down in the middle of the cage like he did against JDM. We saw him struggle heavily with that against Dustin Poirier. Like, he'd shoot that single leg and Dustin would literally be like, it was like the craziest fucking defense ever. Like, he literally just tugged his feet out of there, didn't even stuff the head or anything. He just kind of squirmed away from him. It was kind of crazy. But, you know, Dustin Poirier, old man Dustin Poirier hitting a switch on Islam Makhachev and then cutting him open with an elbow, like, that leaves room for doubt if you're backing Islam Makhachev here. Because Ian Garry, say what you want about Ian Garry, even though he's an absolute fucking imbecile and a disgrace to the sport with how he carries himself, he is an absolutely fantastic mixed martial artist, and his fight IQ is through the roof. And his preparation for these fights is truly next level, and I have no doubts that he's going to enter this fight with a no stones left unturned mentality. And, you know, I don't think that Islam's going to be able to compete with him in the striking whatsoever. And one of the reasons that Islam was able to get Volkanovski down so much was because he'd hurt him, you know, with a knee, with a big left hand, get him against the fence, using the striking to get him up against the fence before he can really, shoot to the legs before getting to the body lock, which is really where he had most success against Volk. Do I think he can get to the body lock against Ian Garry? I do think so, but Ian Garry's not going to get struck or hit with a combination that makes him back up to the fence in the same way that Volkanovski did, because Ian Garry, along with Volkanovski, I think has some of the best footwork in all of MMA. I think that Ian Garry and Volkanovski are like number 1 and 2 in terms of footwork in MMA right now in 2026. I think Ian Garry's footwork is going to give Islam major issues. I think it's going to give Islam major issues because I don't think Islam's going to be able to take a clean shot in the middle of the cage, and it's going to be that striking that he's going to have to use to push Ian Garry back. And I don't think Ian Garry's going to be moving back in a straight line that often in this fight. I think he's really going to be using his lateral movement. That's going to help him with his, defensive grappling out in the open. And if he does get, body locked against the fence, which is 100% where Islam has to get this fight if he wants to win, I don't think he's just going to get his back taken and subbed easily. Like, I think he's going to be able to defend any submissions from Islam. I'm quite confident in saying that Ian Garry doesn't get subbed here. I think Ian Garry would rather lose a decision where he just gets controlled than getting finished. I think Ian Garry is a fighter that we will probably never see get finished because, one, he has great eyes and good defense on the feet, and two, like, his submission defense and overall grappling defense is a very high level. Now, if anybody was going to do it, it would be Islam, but I don't know. I just have this inclination that Ian Garry is one of these guys that he's going to improve a lot when the time comes. Took a short notice fight against Shavkat, performed excellently there, and the main reason he lost against Shavkat was because he got outstruck, and Shavkat had a size advantage against Ian Garry and an overall physicality advantage against Ian Garry. Don't get me wrong, Islam's going to be much stronger when they're actually tied up in the clinch on the mat, of course, but Islam's not going to be tagging Ian Garry with spinning back fist and darting right hands, crashing the pocket like Shavkat was. Islam's going to have to rely on his kicks in this fight because I don't think he's going to be able to land a paw on Ian Garry in terms of the boxing. Like, he was able to box with DP a little bit, but then we saw how DP looked against Max. Like, is Islam regressing? It's a possibility. It really is, because we don't know how good Jack Della Maddalena is as of right now. Like, this win could really age poorly. And I know that JDM beat Bilal, Ian Garry beat Bilal, so you can kind of make the same argument in terms of, okay, well, he looked good before fighting Islam, but then gets completely dominated. I have a high level of confidence in saying that Ian Garry is a much higher level fighter than JDM. You can tell that just, on their records before title fights. Like, JDM beat Gilbert Burns before he beat a post-surgery Bilal Muhammad. And of course, Ian Garry beat post-surgery Bilal Muhammad too, but he beat Jeff Neal, had a great fight against Shavkat, and he's been the only person in the UFC to beat Carlos Prates and MVP. That just shows the level that Ian Garry's operating at. Like, I think he's just as much of a knobhead as anybody else, but he's a very talented fighter. And this fight's not taking place in Abu Dhabi. If this fight was taking place in Abu Dhabi, it's Islam all day. Like, I would never pick against Islam in Abu Dhabi. He's absolutely cracked there. But this is going to be in Philly, so it's neutral territory. Neither of these guys are going to have, the crowd on their side. That's a big factor, because in Abu Dhabi, okay, let's say Islam has the fucking body lock and hasn't gotten a takedown for 3.5 minutes. In Abu Dhabi, no one's going to say anything. The crowd's still going to be cheering. In Philly, if Islam has the body lock for 3 minutes and doesn't get a takedown with it, I think the crowd's going to start booing. And you are lying to yourself if the crowd booing, if you think that doesn't affect the refereeing in the fight. It does. If the crowd starts booing when Islam has a body lock and he's not doing anything with it, the ref's going to separate him for sure. And, you think about the damage-based scoring now. Is Islam going to do that much damage to Ian Garry? Is he? Like, if he doesn't get that sub over 5 rounds, is Islam going to do that much damage to Ian Garry? I'm telling you, he's not taking him down in the center of the cage with ease every single round like he did against JDM. It's not happening. JDM doesn't have the elusive footwork. He doesn't have the anti-grappling that Ian Garry does, and he doesn't have the long-rangey striking. JDM and Islam are the same size. Ian Garry's going to mog Islam low-key out there. He's going to mog him with the height and reach. Ian Garry's going to be able to touch him up at range. I really do think that Ian Garry, I think there's going to be a gap with the striking ability in this fight. Ian Garry is very good against southpaws. That's not going to throw him off whatsoever. And Islam is one of the worst strikers that Ian Garry's gone against recently. I think Shavkat, Carlos Prates, and MVP are all better strikers than Islam. Like, Gary's going to be able to outpoint Islam on the feet. I genuinely would not be surprised if it's like a 3-to-1 significant strike ratio in favor of Ian Garry. That wouldn't surprise me at all. If Islam's not just completely ragdolling him on the mat, which I just don't see happening. I've mentioned that multiple times. I don't see it happening. I think it's going to be a very close fight, whoever wins, because I do see it going the distance. I don't think Islam's going to sub him. I have confidence in Ian Garry that he's going to not get subbed in this fight. And it's like, is Islam holding him with a body lock against the fence going to win him the fight? Because I for sure see Islam getting to the body lock against the fence. Ian Garry. And I think Islam's going to have to eat a few shots to even get to that position, because I don't think he's going to be able to outstrike him to get him to the fence in the same manner that he did against Vulcan DP. Just because of the height. I don't think he's going to be able to land hands on Machado Garry. He's not going to be able to land hands on Ian, so he's not going to be able to back him up to the fence as often. And while they're at range, Ian Garry's going to be touching him with the jab, landing uppercuts, landing kicks, and Islam's going to have to eat like 2 or 3 shots just to close the distance to get to the body lock. And then if he can't get him down, he's going to maybe start to fatigue. Like, obviously, Islam can hold a body lock for 25 minutes if he really needs to, but are we that confident that the ref's not going to separate him if Islam's not doing anything? I don't know, guys. Like, this is an interesting fight. And Ian Garry plus 300 is tempting. Because I saw DP take 2 rounds off of Islam. And I made it, like, one of my best videos ever was talking about how Islam had 0 chance of possibly losing to Dustin Poirier. I'd be lying if my ass cheeks weren't clenched going into that 5th. Because I had a fuck ton of money on Islam too. Money line and inside the distance versus DP. And I thought DP was about to fucking have a shine bright like a diamond moment. And if DP's shining bright like a diamond against Islam, what is Ian Garry going to do? Because I think Ian Garry is operating at a higher level right now than Dustin Poirier was then. Dustin Poirier sprawling in the middle of the cage, hitting switches against Islam, against the fence. The proof's in the pudding. He can be beat, Islam. But I'm not picking against a goated fighter. I'm just not. I will not be the one that picks Ian Garry. I don't care if Ian Garry wins. I had to make my case for it because it's something I've seen. It's something I've seen, and I worry about it in this fight. There's been worrying things on the side of Makhachev. You know, obviously, if you look at Islam's earlier career, Dan Hooker, Drew Dober, you know, fights like that, he's able to easily dominate guys on the ground. Even against Charles Oliveira, he didn't have that much adversity. But Charles is a guy that will operate off his back if you put him there. Ian Garry, I think, is going to really just be trying to keep this shit on the feet as much as he possibly can. Now, if Ian Garry tries to have one of these I can grapple better than you moments, I want to prove that I can take down Islam, or I want to prove that I can submit Islam, he's going to fucking lose miserably. But if he fights how I think he will, because I think his fight IQ is genuinely great. I think his overall IQ is fucking piss poor and he's a retard just in terms of his takes on life. But in the cage, I can't hate on Ian Garry. I think he's one of the most talented fighters on the roster. And I think his submission defense is going to be there, you know, training with Damian Maia, training with Charles Oliveira consistently down there at Shoot the Box. He went out to Tbilisi in Georgia and got some anti-wrestling training in. It's going to be a hard night for Islam, and if Islam has an off night, like he did against DP, like he may have had against Volk in the first fight, if he has an off night, there's a possibility Ian Garry sneaks this shit off with a decision of 3-2. Because if the ref separates him, dude, and Islam isn't getting takedowns, like, he's not going to be able to camp the body lock in Philly. Like, the ref's going to separate him. And I think that Ian Garry's going to do good at stopping the fucking fence takedowns, dude. I'm telling you, this shit's going to be competitive. Ian Garry spread, if it's like plus 10.5, if you can get a decent number on that, or maybe even plus 7.5, he can win. He can lose a few rounds. He only needs to win like one if you take one of those alt point spreads. But I think the betting value could be on Ian Garry here. But just for the pick, I'm gonna take Islam Makhachev, 48-47 split decision. I can't see Dustin Poirier do what he did to Islam and think that Ian Garry can't have a good performance here. So give me Islam, split decision. I think he beats the record for most consecutive UFC victories in a row. I think he can go down as the GOAT after this. I don't hate that take. I do think Islam Makhachev is a goated fighter, one of the best to ever do it. But this is a tricky matchup. This really is a tricky matchup. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. That means a lot to me. Enjoy the card this weekend and have a great rest of your day.